Hello and welcome to this very special program of Rajya Sabha Television. I'm Arfa Khanam Sherwani. We are here at JNU today, which is hosting the 75th session of Indian History Congress. There are more than a couple of thousand scholars are gathered from all around the world, and we are going to discuss today the journey of India-Sri Lanka relations. Yes, exactly. This goes back to maybe hundreds of years ago, and we will try and touch different historical milestones of these relationships. Maybe we can start from Emperor Ashoka to up till now. Emperor Ashok, who actually introduced Buddhism to Sri Lanka, and then because it's very important to understand history to actually know our present and also predict the future, and becomes all the more important when we are discussing India and Sri Lanka relationship, because the relations between these two countries are civilizational relations. I have an elite panel of guests with me today. I have Ms. Professor Osman Bopirachi, I beg your pardon, and Professor S.B. Hetirachi. Then I have Professor W.I. Shrivira. Three of them are from Sri Lanka, and our very own Professor Rakesh Badbyal from JNU India. All four of the guests, thank you very much for joining us here. I would want to start from Professor Osman Bopirachi. Professor Bopirachi, we say that Sri Lanka has recorded history of 2,500 years. And if we go back to the age when Emperor Ashoka actually was ruling India, and how he introduced Buddhism to Sri Lanka, which now is a dominant identity for Sri Lankans, how exactly do you think Buddhism has actually affected the idea of Sri Lanka?
Thing is, the chronicles, the great Mahavamsa, which is the great chronicle of Sri Lanka, dating back to the 5th century, recording the events happening from the 6th century BC onwards. So there you get very clear evidence of Emperor Ashoka sending one of his sons, Mahendra, to Sri Lanka with the Buddhism. So the Sri Lankan king Devanapiyattis was converted to Buddhism, and since that day, in spite of all kinds of invasions and other things, Buddhism prevailed in the country, and it has become the religion of the majority of Sri Lanka. So as we know, the Buddhism disappeared almost from India, and Sri Lanka could continue with it, and it's almost a Buddhist country, if I may say so.
No, but the way it was actually introduced as the religion of the state, how exactly do you think it has changed the Sri Lankan society, culture, civilization as a whole?
Yeah, it was introduced, it's a very good point, it was introduced as a state religion because Ashoka himself was converted to Buddhism, and the first people to convert into Buddhism were from apart from the king and all his uncles and wives and all that. So it was introduced as a state religion, but it very soon went into the heart of the people. So they started believing in this. What we have to emphasize here, one point, before the introduction of Buddhism, there was no real religion as we understand it today, Buddhism or Hinduism or Jainism, any other. So it came as a basic religion which was already established in India, so it became the state religion in a sense.
So Professor Hetirachi, do you think this was the first linkage between India and Sri Lanka, Buddhism as a religion?
Well, according to the chronicles, as my good friend Professor Bopirachi mentioned, Mahavamsa is there, that the great chronicle, and we have another chronicle earlier than that, that's called Deepavamsa, and we have Pali commentaries. According to these sources, Buddhism was in fact known to Sri Lanka well before Ashoka period. Well before Ashoka period, according to these sources. It is recorded that Buddha visited 3 times Sri Lanka. It is recorded in the chronicles, and there were a number of other relations between Sri Lanka and India as far as Buddhism is concerned. We call before Ashokan periods all the events are legendary, but still there are some examples showing that Buddhism was known to Sri Lanka. And when I say this, the Sri Lankan kingship, for example, established in Sri Lanka with the Sakyan family of India. Sakyan family of India, we know that Buddha's father was Suddhodana. He had a number of brothers. One was Amitodana.
Right.
That Amitodana's son's daughter went to Sri Lanka, and he married to a prince in Sri Lanka. Then the Sri Lankan kinship emerged. That is record. That is
but when exactly do you think that Buddhism actually became the religion of masses in Sri Lanka?
Religion of
Masses.
masses.
Yeah.
Well, as he mentioned, Professor Bopiarachi mentioned, with the arrival of Mahinda Thera and Sangamita, that is Sangamita is his sister.
Yeah.
They went to Sri Lanka not only with Buddhism but with Indian culture, I must say. With particularly with Sangamita, Botri went to Sri Lanka, sapling of Botri. So it was established in Anuradhapura in the kingdom. Then along with that, about 210 families belonging to different artists, different crafts, Srenis went to Sri Lanka. They in fact started Sri Lankan culture, sculpture, paintings, and so on.
Right.
So with that, Buddhism and Buddhist culture went into the deep of Sri Lankan society.
Right. Right. Professor Sirivira, I mean, from then up till now, the culture and the lineage to Buddhism has been unbroken in Sri Lanka, which is tremendous, which of course in itself is a record around the world. So what exactly do you think, what were the points and there were events which actually made Buddhism almost a permanent thing to Sri Lankans? What exactly happened?
Well, that applies to state and religion. I would like to start with Max Weber's theory that all religions cater to two situations. One is to legitimize the authority of the rulers. So the rulers are requested to patronize Buddhism, construct dagobas, stupas, give alms and so on, and intermediaries, the monks come.
Yeah.
Then Buddhism, like any other religion, caters to the ordinary people also. Those who are poor, those who are ruled, have to get compensation in another life. So the state and the religion is intertwined. So that way, when Buddhism was embraced by the Sri Lankan kings, so they used it to legitimize their authority.
Using
But
religion as a tool, you're saying?
Religion has been a tool to legitimize the authority.
Right.
It is coming up to now. All rulers, including the present regime, they use the religion that is not a doctrinal religion to legitimize the ruler's authority and get the support of the masses. It is not only related to Buddhism and state, Hinduism and state, or Islam and state, or Christianity and state. It's the same. So religion has two dimensions. One is the doctrinal aspect. Now doctrinal aspect, according to Buddhism, permanent bliss, nibbana, that cannot be achieved by ordinary people. So ordinary people are made to believe that they will be compensated in the next birth. Be nice, be obedient to the rulers, and the rulers will construct dagobas. They will do all patronage while doing other things, sometimes using military strength, or sometimes using violence to strengthen their authority.
For somebody like me who is actually a non-history student, for me when I think of Buddhism, the first thought comes into my mind is non-violence. Though when we talk about Sri Lanka, I don't know, I might be wrong, but then they say that, you know, actually to retain the dominance of Buddhism, Sri Lanka had to deviate from the way of non-violence. Do you agree with that?
It is the it has nothing to do with Buddhism. It is the popular Buddhism. It is the Buddhism.
What I'm trying to say is that, you know, some wars had to be fought just to retain the dominance of Buddhism, that, you know, so that it remains the religion of majority.
That proves what I said earlier. Religion is utilized to maintain the legitimacy of the rulers. So the wars are being fought. This is what I say. Violence is perfect.
You're saying the religion was used as a pretext?
As a pretext. Otherwise, most of the rulers, even the present day rulers, all of them should end up in Nibbana for the public works they are doing. Public works they are doing. But religion and state.
Right.
So religion is needed. Doctrinal aspects are needed. Because people will have to look for something.
You're saying that politicized way of religion will not be accepted and should not be there, right? Professor Badbia, let's talk strictly in Indian context. Leave aside Ambedkar for a moment. If we look at the era and time period much before Ambedkar, what exactly do you think, what were the reasons and conditions where you know, we could spread Buddhism in India? And how do you see its linkage now to Sri Lanka?
You see, I get amazed when I actually think about the way Buddhism disappeared from India. I don't think any explanation has been given which is comprehensive. Why the Buddhism emerged, we know many contexts have been explained, but how does it disappear? It is very difficult for me to explain my child that he doesn't have a Buddhist neighbor, whereas Buddhism emerged. Now, the context, whenever a majoritarian sense emerges in India during my own lifetime, adult lifetime of 25-30 years, whenever I see a majoritarian sense emerging and capturing state power, I have that sense coming that whenever you have the religion and state gets mixed, there are very powerful popular protest comes in. I think that is the inherent notion of Indianness, that they do not tolerate state and religion mix. Maybe that explains, I don't know whether that explained the, and therefore very interesting.
But there have been many times in history when we've seen that mix very well.
That's what I'm saying.
But not the needed protest.
Why is that Sashanka comes and uproots, the anger is so huge that he uproots the banyan tree? Or so, why is that anger? Why is that Buddhism, which is a popular religion in the entire Maharashtra, disappears? What happens? What explains this? I think therefore the spread of Buddhism was phenomenal. Wherever I go, all the relics are Buddhist relics. And what had happened? That, if one has a comprehensive explanation of that, we might have an explanation of basic Indian ethos. I think there the notion of plurality and religion and state differentiation explains. And therefore the spread of Buddhism till Ambedkar, as you say, it's still shrouded in many mysteries. But one thing is clear from, if we take lessons from history, that the basic Indian ethos is not to mix state with religion.
Right. But how do you see now come back to Ambedkar now, how do you see Ambedkar doing any good to Buddhism and converting people into Buddhism? Do you think post his Ambedkar we are now back to where we started from?
It reminds me of very powerful argument by Irfan Habib, one of the historians who is there in the History Congress, that there is no inherent ethos in any religion, but the ethics basically is carried when the ethics of the time, when the religion emerges. So therefore Buddhism by itself, as Ambedkar thought and many Dalit leaders think, Buddhism by itself is not going to eradicate caste, which has not happened. Yes. Because in Sri Lanka Buddhism is also enmeshed with caste system. So the argument that Buddhism is a non-entity caste is a no argument,
Right.
and Ambedkar follows that
And
argument.
while one of the prime reasons why he did so, why he himself converted to Buddhism, and he said, "I'm born a Hindu, but I will not die as a Hindu," was to elevate people from the caste system.
But
he was not successful.
But this is not historical explanation of Buddhism. So therefore, even today's Dalit politics is enmeshed in that contradiction, because
Right.
Buddhism by itself, unless you therefore Gandhi is very important. Gandhi said, I'll try and hurt or hit the fundamentals of caste system, and that is hierarchy.
Right. So, Professor Badbyal, we have to take a short break at the moment. We'll just come back in a few seconds. Welcome back. We are here at Indian History Congress, which is being hosted by JNU, and we are discussing the journey of India-Sri Lanka relations. I have a very eminent panel of guests with me here. Professor Bopirachi, I would like to start this segment with you, that we say that India and Sri Lanka relations are based on a deep and abiding friendship based on shared historical experiences and common civilization, culture, all of that together. And we also happen to be two countries who also have the common experience of fighting with the colonial rule. Do you think it has some way affected or probably brought together India and Sri Lanka?
The independence of Sri Lanka is a result of the struggle made in India, because it's really started in India, because being not only a country but a big continent. So it started, I mean, of course in Sri Lanka there were some independent movements, but it was really influenced by the Indian movement here, and we are, I mean, the independence of Sri Lanka is a result of the struggle made in India. So the anti-colonial experience was there in India as well as in Sri Lanka, and also the after the colonial period, the reconstructed nation, especially of the British policy of divide and rule, favoring some ethnic groups or religious groups against the majority, was there in Sri Lanka. So I mean, this will take us to a bigger problem of analyzing the whole political situation in Sri Lanka. So it was in a way what happened after the independence in India, it also happened in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka being an island, being a small country, it was felt much more than in India. India is a vast continent with all the ethnic groups that we have discussed this morning, groups of, I mean, languages and ethnic groups and all the other customs and everything. So in Sri Lanka it was felt much more. So that was the beginning of a new era.
But do you think that Sri Lanka has learnt anything from the struggle India had gone through, being neighbouring countries, though we know the ways of communication were not very strong at that point in time, but still?
Yes, I mean, at the very beginning, yes. I mean, one of the basic problems we had was, I mean, in Sri Lanka, in India at least, under Mahatma Gandhi, you had the whole India behind. I'm not generalizing. I am aware of all the problems India had.
But at least it appeared at that point.
Yeah, it appeared
time,
in a moment when you have a common enemy. So the whole India united and against and fought it. I don't know whether my colleagues would agree with me, but whether it really happened in Sri Lanka in that way, whether the Muslim community or the Tamil community participated in that struggle in the same way that India has done, I don't think so. The reason is that India had a larger struggle and also the British interests in India was much, more important than the ones.
Or are you trying to say that Sri Lanka unfortunately did not have a Gandhi, somebody who everybody could come along with?
I will not be killed by colleagues. Yes, I regret. I mean, this is my personal opinion. So we had our, own leaders like D.S. Senanayake, Senanayake and others, but it's not the same struggle.
Right.
And we are paying for it, and we have paid for it.
Right. Professor Hetirachi, now I'll come to you. You might agree and disagree with your colleague, but tell me how different Sri Lankan struggle was, Sri Lankan freedom struggle was from India, what kind of difference do you see? Because it almost happened at the same time in history. So how, you know, these two countries which were fighting almost with the same enemy, how the struggle, how different was the struggle for these two countries?
Basically, I don't see much difference. In India, national leaders started their campaign, struggle for freedom. Then when we analyze the facts in history regarding that struggle for freedom, basically Sri Lanka followed India. In India, they started different kind of societies, for example, organization. Soon after that, Sri Lanka also followed that system. So, although we don't have that non-violent movement as such in India, we also had certain kind of to come to amicable settlement regarding certain problems. Always India followed what Sri Lanka followed what India has started, basically. Then the national leaders also, when Sri Lanka started its struggle, being Sinhalese are the majority, they were not the leaders. In fact, leaders were Tamil in a way.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. In 1919, we started the National Congress. You know, the leader of that Congress is Ponnambalam. He is a Tamil, not D.S.A. Nayak. So at that time, we don't have racial problems and other sectarian bias and this and that. We did not have. They were real leaders of the nation. Not Sinhalese, not Tamils, not Buddhists. No. They were the national leaders. That leadership qualities, I think, they take from India. Indian system also like that.
Though it was more complex and even larger than Sri Lanka, so it was probably more difficult for India to do that than for Sri Lanka. Right. Professor Sevira, you know, when we talk about pre-independence area of Sri Lanka and India, how they fought their, you know, battles against colonial rule, but how they evolved as new nations. What kind of a difference do you see between India evolving as a modern democracy who tried and accepted the secular form of living, the secular way of living life, and how different do you see it, or how similar do you see it happening this in Sri Lanka?
If you would permit me, I like to differ a little on the independence struggle of India and Sri Lanka. India established the Indian National Congress in 1885, but again upper middle class. Mahatma Gandhi, Sri Jawaharlal Nehru, they thought it was not going in the correct direction, so it became a mass movement. They sweated for it. Gandhi sacrificed his soul for it, and so many joined along with Gandhi, and finally India gained independence. And following year, although it was partition, following year India became a republic, shed the colonial dress. Whereas in Sri Lanka, independence struggle was launched by upper middle class, the elite, English speaking elite, who wore tailcoat, top hat, and they didn't change the political systems. Post-independence Sri Lanka didn't change much like in India. In India, it was a real great struggle in Sri Lanka.
From the scratch,
from the masses. In Sri Lanka, the power was transferred on a platter to a group who accepted British values, British norms, British dress, the way they eat. India, it's completely different. So we took so many years. We became a republic only in 1972. Until then,
but do you think that the kind of what you're saying, that reflection of this also now shows in Indian in Sri Lankan society and polity at the moment now?
Exactly.
You think it's carrying the baggage of not having fought its own battle?
No, but there was a peaceful revolution, a mass revolution, not a armed revolution. In fact, Le Monde, the French newspaper, said it was a silent democratic revolution in 1956. Masses came up.
Right.
But subsequently there had been different changes. The way the Sri Lankan polity had been moving has been, it is a centralized system. And with the introduction of the executive presidency in 1978, now at the moment we have a big political crisis. With the introduction of the executive presidency, the democratization process which India witnessed, which India enjoys, was lost. So now we are in a critical stage, and now India, when compared to India, is 50 times larger than Sri Lanka. Population is about 60 times larger.
No, but would you like to also list some social and political reform movements which Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan people carried out to actually develop into a new modern state, like we can say with some pride that we did in India?
Yeah, there was this nationalism, temperance movement against the British, temperance movement.
No, I'm saying post-independence, the way we evolved as new societies.
Post-independence, yes, it was Mr. S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike in 1956 tried to introduce. Mr. S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike had many things in common with Sri Jawaharlal Nehru.
Right.
Wherever Sri Jawaharlal Nehru took a position, Mr. Bandaranaike took the same position. But subsequent governments have particularly...
Okay. So Professor Badwal, I would like to come to you, since he is talking about now Mr. Bandaranaike and Pandit Nehru, and we are here at Jawaharlal Nehru University. Tell me, what kind of similarities do you see in the personality of these two leaders, and when they aligned with each other, I mean towards actually making world, and this part of the world at least, a non-aligned region?
You see, I was trying to work out the 1950 Colombo conference. And very interestingly, when the coverage in the Sri Lankan English newspaper of Nehru was different than the Sinhala newspaper. Very interesting. And whereas the masses were coming to see Nehru, the Colombo masses, and very interesting therefore that Nehru was also a role model. But the first Prime Minister, D. S. Senanaike, himself was a big leader of the society that he comes from, but again, as they say, he could not transcend the social barrier, the social class that he comes from, whereas Nehru has transcended everything. He becomes a global personality, global intellectual, rooted in Indian soil. So therefore he could actually transcend whatever barrier was put before him. And that makes him befriend the British even after a very strong crisis in 1950, that no, we will be part of Commonwealth, but at the same time not to be a dominion.
Right.
So which Senanaike could not do. And I think Bandaranaike in silent way wanted to follow Nehru. Silent way, because Bandaranaike was also the finance minister of Senanaike. So he was following, and he was drafting the Colombo conference minutes. So he could see, and he wanted to. So therefore, there's some way, and Bandaranaike was actually following not only him, but he has also challenge from the other side.
Right.
So he was trapped in some sense, and that is where I saw. Even now, I say Sri Lanka produced leaders, but not statesmen.
Right.
Because Bandaranaike could have been the only leader who could become a statesman.
Right.
Jayawardene could become a leader, but he could not become a statesman.
But he ceased to become. A small reaction of yours, yeah.
Nehru was a great statesman. He was the architect of Indian political system, which is continuing.
Right. And that is why I think probably he's also called not just the Indian leader, but also leader of this entire region, who wanted to see a different world altogether. Heading for a short break now. We'll come back after a few seconds. Welcome back. We are discussing India-Sri Lanka relations. Mr. Badbea, let me start this segment with you because I want to discuss now from Pandit Nehru. Before the break, we were discussing about him and his policies towards Sri Lanka and also his foreign policy. Let's talk about Rajiv Gandhi. What all happened during the LTTE days, the Tamil conflict. Do you think more or less can we conclude that Rajiv Gandhi's Tamil policy or Sri Lanka policy has been an entirely a misadventure?
I have, over the years when I reflect on this thing, I don't think it was a misadventure, but it's a complete failure because he was new and
Misreading, are you saying?
Misreading of the situation, and he was new and he was not guided properly. So he was trusting almost everyone. He trusted Prabhakaran, he trusted Jayawardene, he trusted almost all. Now in politics it's very difficult because this becomes a very murky business. Now he should have his own understanding, and I think he was trying to emerge something out of this, but I think he was trusting too much on too many people, and that is not the way actually prime ministers of great countries move. They have to have their own personality.
Are you trying to say that since he was very young and inexperienced, that is why he did so, and he did not have good advisors? Or maybe the geopolitical conditions were such at that point in time that he couldn't have done anything else?
No, I don't think geopolitical situation was something which was negative, or because he was trusted by Americans at that point of time, though he was taking a disarmament status, but Americans were not very anti him. China was, Deng in fact had the longest handshake with him, so it was not that the political situation, geopolitics was very adverse. But I think that he was not guided properly, and secondly he was trusting everyone too much.
But can we officially say now that India actually helped train some Tamil rebels? Can we say that?
Even long back, we trained. India trained. And that again is a misadventure, because the only person who actually consistent on this was Jayalalitha, who has been saying since 1980s that LTT is a terrorist organization. And you see, even Mujahideen and Taliban, we say, the Americans never say they're a terrorist organization initially. Now we are bearing the fruit. Similarly, LTT was not to be given that kind of thing. They should have understood, and Rajiv Gandhi should have understood that. But
what I'm trying to ask you is that the kind of political, social, economic marginalization the Tamil population was going through, don't you think somebody should have stood for them, and it was Rajiv Gandhi? He may have misread a few things, he may have not really gone the right way, but his intentions, do you doubt his intentions?
You're right, Arfa, but Nehru had Nehru was completely adverse to Senanayke's policy, and even Sirema Bandanayke's policy on Tamil plantation labor. But that did not make him go and train Tamil plantation labor to Indian National Congress's ways. So you don't, Nehru's policy was clear that you are citizen of that country, you are part of that country, you do whatever you do there. We should have followed that policy. We should have given Jayawardene he should not have succumbed to Jayawardene's policy of peace treaty and say that you do whatever with your Tamil population. So how do you do that? That's the test of a political leader.
Professor Sirivira, how is it looked at, I mean, from Sri Lankan point of view? How do you think what Rajiv Gandhi did was right or wrong? His intentions were right, his ways were wrong, or do you think he did not have the right objectives?
I would put it in the global power configuration context. Until the Soviet Union collapsed, India, Soviet Union, they had a very close alliance. Whereas Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, they were on the other side, USA. So when this ethnic problem exacerbated, Sri Lanka, Jayawardene's regime adopted the foreign policy which India considered it was against India's security interest. Jayawardene got trained armed personnel in Pakistan, got Pakistan weapons, got weapons from China, got Mossad too. Israeli intersection was established in 1984 in Colombo in the US Embassy premises. Kinimini security agency from Britain, they were brought in. Now at that time, power configurations were that Soviet Union, India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, USA. So, and certain actions of Jayawardhana's regime, giving 160 acres for a VOA, Voice of America transmitting station. India was very, very alert on that. In fact, when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, after signing the accord on 29th July 1987, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi in his speech even mentioned this. Then Trincomalee, globally, strategical still in this technological age, still it is very important. There was a tender given by Mr. Jayawardhana's public tender. India applied, US applied, not US, a company called Bermuda Corporation, US sponsored. India applied, Soviet Union applied, the tender was given to Bermuda Corporation, Bermuda Coastal Corporation, Trincomalee, to refurbish and use the oil tanks, 99 oil tanks left by the Britishers during the Second World War. Now, then it transpired that these people, this company had a contract with US Navy. Navy. Then there was a Pentagon published a map saying Trincomalee was a place where in US Navy was given facilities. Later they withdrew. That was a printer's error. J.R. Jayawardhana's regime also said it was a printer's error. But all these India would have been observing. So India, in fact, there you see, unfortunately, there were contradictions in Indian policy. Initially training.
You're saying there were contradictions. Professor Hettiarachchi, do you think if it was not Rajiv Gandhi, if he did not do the way he did, if he did not intervene in Sri Lankans, which now is called an internal matter, how different this picture could have been?
Well, if I may go back to India, Indo-Sri Lanka Accord signed by Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and Jayawardhana. There are good and bad things both. Now take for example, ever since we have signed that agreement, everybody is following this. Every 13th amendment is following. With certain amendment is still there. The successive government had the chance to abolish it, but no government.
But are you trying to say that the initial policy of Rajiv Gandhi, which unofficially, if we can say that, of training some of the Tamil rebels was wrong?
No, I don't know.
But then later he corrected and probably aligned with Sri Lankan government. That was right.
That's right. Training. There were a number of training camps in India. I know that. We know that. Sri Lankan people very much know that. There were about 13, 14 training camps, LTT training camps. We do not agree with that. But the thing is, the step taken by Rajiv Gandhi is correct.
No, but are you saying the first part of his policy was wrong, but when he tried and corrected it, the destiny did not support it?
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm trying to understand that if it was not Rajiv Gandhi, it was not somebody, as Professor Badbyal called him, a young, inexperienced man, or probably who did not have good advisors. If it was a mature politician, what kind of a cooperation, Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan government would have expected from India, which actually has a sizable population of Tamil people already living in this country?
Well, it is a very trivial type of question.
Actually, it's difficult to look at it in that respect. But then only we can understand that what wrong did Rajiv Gandhi do. Yeah, please go ahead. Then I'll come to you.
Having any training camps in India
can never be justified.
Cannot be justified. But the step taken after that, I think it's a welcome. We all welcome that kind of step taken by Rajiv Gandhi and Indian politicians. And after that, there were certain agreement between Sri Lankan government and the LTT. Then due to the change of government, certain things may be bad or good happened. If that kind of Indo-Lanka Accord were not taken into effect, then there would have been disastrous consequences as far as I see.
Right. So Professor Srivia, you wanted to say something, and I also want to ask you another question, that what exactly the role of Indian peacekeeping forces do you see? What wrong did they do, and were they there for any good purpose as well? Did they do something right as well?
No. Before coming to that, your reference to Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, inexperience. No, the Sri Lankan policy was designed earlier by the most experienced Mrs. Indira Gandhi. The training camps and all those started during Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And so it is not that. But the IPKF, of course, IPKF, that was a mistake. It is not like showing the power, showing force. But when even in any situation, when you try to apply force, there are constraints. Now, Sri Lankan position, because even Prime Minister Mr. Premadasa didn't like it, and the agreement was not known by the cabinet. Mr. Premadasa even boycotted the lunch given by Mr. Jayawardena in honor of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. Infringement of Sri Lankan sovereignty. Forces go without passport, and they were not a peacekeeping force. Initially they thought they were going to be a peacekeeping force, but after 8 weeks or 10 weeks, LTT completely abandoned, and they started fighting. IPKF had to fight. IPKF per day, Indian rupees, Indian government had to spend 2 crores. IPKF soldiers, more than 1,200 got injured. More than 1,200 got killed. Then the political solution they implemented. Provincial Council, Northeast Provision. It became a liability. The Chief Minister of the Provincial Council, Vardaraja Perumal, had to be protected by the Indian government.
Okay. Professor Boppiachi, what do you think now, looking down 2 decades since then, more than that in fact, are Sri Lankan people still suspicious of India and its policies?
I don't think so. I mean, let me...
and before that, let me ask you what exactly they thought that point in time. What India did, India's policy towards Sri Lanka and Tamil cause. For India it was Tamil cause, for Sri Lanka it was Tamil problem. What exactly do you think the Tamil population thought, Sri Lankan Tamil population and also Sinhalese? How exactly the thought process was then?
The whole question is that it's a question of the sovereignty of a country. When the Indian peace force intervened in Sri Lanka, did they have a right to intervene? Because the problem, as you said very clearly, the problem was created by India. As Professor Hettiarachchi said, during the independence movement, the Tamil leaders were in the independence movement. And there was, of course, a struggle, continuous struggle, the Tamil people asking for their rights, but in a democratic way. If it took some sort of, violent nature, it is because the problem was created by Indian government. So again, that was the first mistake. Second mistake was to intervene in a sovereign country, although the Rajiv Gandhi was invited by Jayawardena. And the third question one may ask, what was the result of this? Tamil people were not happy, and the Sinhalese were not happy. Nobody was happy with that. And ultimately, it didn't come to any sort of a solution to the Tamil problem or this, or the Sri Lankan problem. I would take it. So I am for the peace. I am not for war. War will never solve a problem.
No, but in an ideal world, there shouldn't be any armed movement. But probably. The Tamil people were waiting for too long, and maybe the kind of human rights violation they were going through. Don't you think that all of this actually resulted in some sort of a movement which India had to support in any way? Maybe Rajiv Gandhi may have gone wrong in reading what exactly he should have done at the point in time.
I will support the Tamil, I am for the Tamil cause, for the problems, and the Tamil, not only the Tamil population in the north and the east, but all the Muslim population, and also some plantation workers, and also in the Sinhalese community, the social injustice. I would fight for it, not with the arms, but with the politics. Now, if you look at, I don't know whether Professor Sirvira will agree with me, things that the Tamil people wanted to achieve, now they can achieve through the democratic process. Now, the North Provincial Council is dominated by the Tamils, not by the Sinhalese. So they can fight. I know there are political problems, as Professor Sirvira said today. So we would have come through a democratic process and fought for the fights, fought for the rights of the Tamil people. There was no necessity for the Indian government to intervene into a sovereign country. So,
Professor Hathiarachi, let me just ask you. I mean, the second part of this question, that whether the Tamil population, he's saying that even Tamils were not happy. Do you agree with him that, you know, somebody, some country, one section of the society stood for Tamil people at that point in time when probably most of the people were silent? When India stood up for the Tamil cause, they may have, you know, the result may not have been the desirable, but do you think the Tamil population was angry with the way India had gone forward and tried to help them?
Well, Tamil population has two entries regarding that problem. They say, although the 13th amendment was introduced according to in the Lanka Accord, it was never implemented as such. Only part of it was implemented. Therefore, they are.
It remains the issue even today.
That is one of the ideas they have put forward. The Sinhalese say, if the 13th amendment was fully introduced, the unitary state of Sri Lanka will never stand. The unitary position will go off. Therefore, it was not good. So these are the two views on both sides. So as I have pointed out earlier, but the problem remains that there were a number of successive governments. What these government did, they did not take into account whether they are going to abolish this, repeal this Hindu Lanka Accord. They did not take any action. That is the problem. That is the problem. They would have taken some concrete action to address the issue. Address the issue.
I'll have to cut you short. Only a few minutes left in the discussion. Now, Professor Sirvira, now fast forward to present. The kind of reports we get to see these days, I mean, there are reports which say that now there is deeper militarization, there is more singleization of Sri Lanka. Do you think the political marginalization of Tamils has increased in last 2 decades, or maybe I would say post LTT, post 2009?
I would say successive governments in post-independence Sri Lanka have failed to address some of the issues. In fact, when in 1957-58, Mr. Bandaranaike, after making Sinhala the official language, wanted to introduce another solution to the issue of the Tamil Bandaranaike-Chellanayakam Pact. Then what happened was the UMP, the other governments opposed. So successive governments have been playing politics. As we mentioned earlier, we have had no statesman of the caliber of Jawaharlal Nehru. So playing politics with majoritarian politics is the game. It is the game even now. So in that context, I think some statesman, now even the present president had the best of opportunity. After the defeat of the LTT in May 2009, to win the hearts of the Tamils. It has not been done. Every year, the War Heroes Day and so on, fathom into sentiments of a section. But we are like India.
No, but do you think the Tamil cause had died with the demise of LTT?
No, Tamil cause has not died.
But what kind of measures are being done to actually promote the inter-ethnic reconciliation between the communities?
The inter-ethnic relations, at the moment, the very now construction of houses and infrastructure is being done, houses are being constructed, but the problem in the Jaffna Peninsula and the east, you know, when we drive beyond Vavuniya into that territory, we see a different world. The poverty, they have only the resources, either education or agriculture. Industries have not come up, no employment opportunities have grown up, even in in the rest of the.
And how about the autonomy to the regions which are Tamil populated? Is there any serious thinking towards that? And also a very serious question
serious
on, after all of that misadventure.
There is serious
I mean, do you think, Professor, that India can still do something about it? I'm saying, after all of that happened during the Rajiv Gandhi period, do you think India should again go in a different fashion, in a different manner, can do something about it?
India will try to do something because when Tamil Nadu political dynamism and all that intensifies. But I don't think external solutions are good for the internal the conflict.
Yes, India can do a lot of things to come to achieve some reconciliation. Very recently, India has taken a very good step, I must say. That is that voting against Sri Lanka in UN. I fully agree with that.
But then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh did not go to Chogam conference in Sri Lanka.
no, that is a different story. That is a different story. India did not take that stance against Sri Lanka. India took that stance against the present regime, which is violating democratic rights of people, human rights of people. For that matter, I fully agree with India. But still,
Professor Bapirachi, there is one thing which is completely unaddressed and left, and these are about the war crimes.
Yes.
Which Sri Lanka international community says, BBC 4 documentary we've seen, that it has committed. Do you think India has any role to pressurize Sri Lanka to at least bring these people to book?
Yes, India has the right, and also I mean it's a let me come to the one of the questions you raised. How India can help Sri Lanka now?
And I was saying this is one of the ways.
This is one of the things, because we have to solve the problem of what happened at the last stage of the civil war. Unless it is clear to us, I mean to the Sri Lankans, I mean every community, we are not going to solve the problems. Right, so it should be very clear what really happened at the very end of the war. So we need to give clear explanations. I don't know who is telling the truth, whatever it is. Now at this moment, I think the basic question in Jaffna and also is where the majority of the Tamils live, the basic question is agriculture. They don't have land, they don't have irrigation, they don't know where to survive. There India can help the country, and also no industries, no employment.
And should there be an independent investigation? Some international body should do that?
Yes, I mean of course yes. Yeah, there should be an independent investigation.
Mr. Badbial, can India actually pressurize in its diplomatic ways and means to actually carry out an independent investigation?
I don't think so. India, as Pandit Nehru in his book says, India's role in the world is not that of a leadership role, but that of a shock absorber. India is always a peace. Peace is a new cliche, but India has always absorbed the other people's crisis. So therefore, when India is vibrant, it also absorbs a lot of West Asian crisis. It has always done that. So pressurizing is not India's way. It should not be doing. It has been doing. That doesn't solve their problem.
I'm completely running out of time. My last question to you, and very short answer. Post now LTT, do you think that India and Sri Lanka can revive their relationship, can actually leave behind 1991 and just move forward?
India doesn't have to revive. They don't have to revive. The relation is there actually. Relation is there. It has to just resynchronized in a way. Because Sri Lanka is culturally part of India's...
If you permit me the last word, I don't agree with this war crimes allegation coming at this time.
You don't think it's true?
You know, in any war, even civilians get killed. In the Second World War, 85,000 died in Hiroshima.
I'm completely short of time. I'm just trying to wrap up this discussion.
I completely disagree with this war crimes allegation.
India and Sri Lanka now on the right track?
I don't know what whether they are on right track. I don't have internal information. But India must
now
learn.
there is no AIADMK, there is no DMK in the center. I'm saying, can Prime Minister Narendra Modi now single-mindedly can do what it wants to do with the Sri Lankan policy?
On this, I think Manmohan Singh's decision not to go to Chogam was such a wise decision, because if he had gone, there would have pressure for him to go to the Jaffna area. What would have he said there?
Right.
Yes.
I think better not to go, and I think that's the wisest political
But
decision.
do you think that now Prime Minister Modi can do better than what Manmohan Singh did, because there's no AIADMK, there's no DMK in the center, and now there will be no political blackmailing as we used to call it earlier?
This is a very paradoxical question, because if you say Tamil question is alive irrespective of LTT not there, so if you say that AIDMK is not there and DMK is not there and Tamil question is not there,
Right.
No, Tamil problem is still there.
so the problem remains, issue remains, we have to go. I think what we need is to have statesmen from Sri Lanka
And
emerging.
also Sri Lanka has to handle its own problem on its own. Probably India can help in some ways,
That's right.
and that too with proper consultation with Sri Lankan,
Exactly.
Sri Lankan
Big
people, and Sri
hearted.
Lankan government. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking part in this discussion. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.